Welcome back to Path of Exile spoiler season, where I give my thoughts on everything that GGG reveals. First up, we've got Trauma Support, and I'd like to have an opinion on it. Overall, I think it's interesting, but without seeing the numbers on the gem, I honestly have no idea. Is it going to give an amount of flat damage, similar to Trauma from, say, Bone Shatter? Or is that part of Bone Shatter and not Trauma? Trauma's just more damage per stack? Are your stacks capped? Will the damage you take scale with level? And in that case, will the damage you deal scale with level? There's a lot of unanswered questions here. This could be an incredibly powerful support gem, and a boon to melee, at least strike skills. Or it could be a whole lot of nothing. Personally, I'm pretty positive on it, and I look forward to seeing how it changes the landscape. I would expect something like you deal 30% less damage, and it takes up a support, so it's really bad at level 1. But then as you level the gem up, the penalty scales back, and ultimately, if you can stack trauma by attacking quickly, it's really, really good. Which is kind of how Bone Shatter works. At least as long as we don't get some sort of attack speed per quality shenanigans the way you currently see with Bone Shatter. Then we also got the Unending Nightmare Keystone, something so unremarkable that I don't really know what to think. Okay, if you just want your Delirium to not end, and you can't afford Delirium Orbs, cool, I guess? But it feels to me like you should either be using Delirium Orbs on this, or just running the Deli in the map. Maybe it's good if you're running a really bad layout for Delirium. Maybe it's good if you're farming in solo Self-Hound and only care about the rewards or the Cluster Jewels. But overall, I think most builds can go far enough with Delirium that this isn't really a boon. And losing the splinters, okay, not a big deal. Simulacrum splinters are generally very cheap to the point of being worthless. Losing the orbs, though, it's gonna hurt every time you think about, but that could have been a skittering. But now onto some new stuff, and maybe more interesting stuff. Speaking of, if you want to keep up with the news daily, then do be sure to get subscribed. I'm gonna have either a YouTube short or a full video every single day, at least so long as GGG announces something. Also, I'm going to be talking about patch notes in a live stream. Get ready for that. Spellblade Support is Battlemage, but it's limited Battlemage because it only applies to one-handed melee weapons. Now, there are some one-handed melee weapons, like Rebuke of Aval or Energy Blade, which have a lot of damage. And we'll have to see the numbers on the gem, but as it is, I'm not sure this is a compelling offering. If anything, it only kind of erodes Inquisitor's identity. You can already get an effect similar to this for wands with Spellslinger support, and you can get an effect like this but better with Battlemage that also applies to two-handed weapons. So does this mean you can take an Inquisitor build and put it on a Trickster to gain all those defenses? Yeah, and that's pretty cool. But it says a percentage. If we're talking about 100%, which is a percentage, okay. If we're talking about 30%, which is a percentage, trash. If we're talking about 130%, grab a spell with high effectiveness of added damage, and oh my god, that's going to be amazing. So while I'm not excited yet, I could very well be excited in the future depending on what it holds. Then, most interestingly here, we have the modifiers for Kirac's map device, starting with Essence at 2 Chaos. Essence is a great early league moneymaker because it doesn't scale at all with map tier, meaning your essences are just as valuable in a tier 1 map as a tier 16 map. I had a lot of success last league doing a map rushing strategy with Essence, Beasts, and Harbinger. If you want to read more about that, I have a whole Essence farming guide. There's also a speed rushing strat, very similar to what I did, over on Maxwell GG. Links to both of those will be down below. I really like Essence. It's a great way to get started. It combines very well with things like Beasts and Harbingers that don't really scale off your map tier. And later on, if you want to keep farming essences, there's ways to do it, such as Nico's Memories, that give you way more essences per hour, but you need a more powerful build or possibly a bigger bankroll. Then we've got Domination. Domination is Shrine Effects. If you happen to get a Blunderbore or like wearing the Gull, I guess this is pretty good. For the most part though, people aren't using Shrines for their effects, they're using them because Shrines say monsters. If you like killing monsters, this is 3 Chaos and a pretty decent way to add them to your map. The next up we've got Breach at 4 Chaos. And this one depends for me, because Breach tends to be very inexpensive to add via Scarabs. I think for most of last league, 4 Chaos would get you a Gilded Breach Scarab, which isn't going to be worth it if this is only 1 breach or 2 breach. But what if this is 4 breaches? Well, then it's a bit more compelling. Again, breaches are monsters, and there's some pretty darn powerful and valuable uniques that have come out of Breach with the recent buffs. So I'm lukewarm on this one, but it could very well be good. We'll just have to see what it gives. And then there's Harbinger for 6 chaos, which competes with the polished Harbinger Scarab, at least most of the time. That tends to be about with a run. This is nice early on, maybe instead of Essence once you're ready to move a little bit away from that, and Fracturing Shards are always in demand. It's really nice to see that Harbinger now has a place other than being hoping for Exalts. So I think 6 chaos is going to be well worth it, but it's going to come down to the Scarab prices and what else you're running. Since even if it's, let's just say 5C for the Scarab, maybe you'll pay 1C more, but use your Scarabs for other things that integrate really well into your strategy, like let's just pretend Expedition and Blight. Then scrolling down a bit, we've got Legion for 6 chaos. This is a spicy one. Dune's Legion remains one of the best ways to get money. You simply drop Divines on the floor. Now, you do need a fairly powerful build, something that clears effectively and can hit large areas. If you have that though, this is going to be great, and 6 chaos is towards the cheaper end. So I would imagine if you want to get your character power leveled via 5 ways, the sets are going to be on the cheap side. A lot of people are going to be farming Legion for the Divines. They kind of treat the sets as extra bonuses on top that you sell off. There's plenty of other rewards from Legion, so maybe consider a build like a bow build, Ignite Prolif, Poison Prolif, something that clears really well on your League starter if you're targeting that, and also a build that excels in open maps. Then at 10 chaos each, we've got Delirium and Ritual. I don't actually know how worth Ritual is at 10 chaos, and in general, I would say Delirium probably isn't worth it either, because you can get 40% or slightly more to have a map get Delirium via the mirror, more if you have Wandering Path, and you could just use a Delirium Orb, which is going to cost less than 10 chaos. There are probably situations where you don't want to use a Delirium Orb, you do want Deli on your map, and you can't just rely on the random spawns. But for the most part, especially with something like Legion, which synergizes really well with this kind of strategy, you're probably going to want something else. You're probably going to rather spend 6C on Legion here than 10C on Delirium. That isn't to say Delirium is always bad on a map device. It's definitely been worse in recent history, but it's always relative, and you can only use one of these. And as for Ritual, I think it largely suffers from the same problem. People are going to be more likely to use Harbinger or Legion for 6C than Ritual for 10C. But there is an interesting and compelling option that is right at the top. That is Fortune Favors the Brave. You can invest into your Atlas to get a little bit of quant on your map, and it applies any of these effects randomly. So you might luck into Ritual even if you're not trying to target farm it. And given the strength of the overall options here, regardless of their price, I do think Fortune Favors the Brave is in a really good spot for people who like Alch and Go strategies. And so those are some of my thoughts on the recently revealed information. I'm excited for Trauma support, I hope it's good, and expect it's going to change up the melee meta. I'm a little bit less excited for Spellblade support because while the concept is really, really cool, I love playing a Magus in Pathfinder, the whole spell strike thing is better fulfilled by cast on crit, and I'm not sure if the Battlemage, specifically for one-handed weapons, is going to end up being practical. However, I haven't seen the numbers. Until we see the level 20 gems, I have no idea. That said, when we do see the level 20 gems, I'm going to talk about it in a video, so be sure to get subscribed, and that way you won't miss it. For the other reveals, the Keystone, Unending Nightmare is just, I'm going to say it, it's bad. I don't think this is particularly useful. I think a lot of these Keystones are designed to simplify the mechanic and make it more approachable, but because the layers of Delirium already add a significant amount of defenses to enemies, and having more enemies means you're more likely to be swarmed, I don't see this working as a way to balance things out for a weaker build. I think you're just going to get destroyed. Then again, maybe I'll be wrong. We'll just have to see what the future holds. I am, however, very excited for the map device, probably going to be farming some Essence early on, maybe going into some Harbinger, or I could do something unusual and swap to Legion later. But I'm curious, what are you going to do? Which things on Kirac's map device are you going to select, and do you think the prices are good? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members whose lovely names should be right over here. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible, and for just $5 a month, you'll see your name up in the credits with these fine folks. If you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out my earlier thoughts on Trauma, or some of my thoughts on Path of Exile 2 and Trial of the Ancestors as a whole. Maybe you're feeling a little nostalgic? Well, don't worry, I've got you with that too. You can look back at some of the best builds from Crucible League. But that's all for me today. Thanks for watching, congrats on making it to the end, and I'll see you again sometime soon.